Oh my god. Are we live? Okay, well that's great. I was kind of tweeting Rob. How's it going, everyone? I guess it is 11:01, so Rob had to put us live right now. My name is CatZ, and with me I have a few friends and guests here that are gonna be talking about stuff on the show. I'm sorry, Rob literally just said started counting from 5 to 0, or like out of nowhere. So I'm not ready for this. But why don't you introduce yourself, Kevin?
Hey guys, I'm Kevin, QXC. I write articles for Team Liquid. You've probably seen some of them. Played lots of Legacy of the Void. Probably one of the most active players for sure. And with me today, Stefan, introduce yourself.
That's me, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Stefan is my Swedish name. Okay. So I should introduce myself. I did that last week. No.
Do it again.
All right. Well, my name is Stefan Andersson. I'm a StarCraft 2 pro gamer, and I'm playing full-time Legacy at this moment with Terran.
Perfect, man.
My turn. I am Theodore Mikkelsen, also known as Theo, and I'm the only Protoss who's not done a single pylon rush yet. There we go.
I guess that leaves me.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Tilo. You probably heard of me.
Oh, wow.
Like this line. Really?
I also play Legacy now because I failed at WCS. So there's nothing else to do anymore.
Perfect. And I am your host, CatZ. On production, we have Rob from production. He is where he belongs. And yeah, we can just jump into it. It feels really awkward not doing production. But yeah, let's just jump into it. So we're going to be going over 2 topics on the last feedback update, and then we're going to be going on the new patch. So excuse the awkwardness as we get settled, and yeah, we should get rolling pretty soon. So first topic, Bob. It says community feedback adepts. You people can vote on the topics now. You used to not be able to, but a lot of people in chat suggested that you should be able to, and so we made it happen. So let me actually just link you that, or Rob, can you link that in the chat or on Skype? Cool. So Rob will be linking those topics in chat. If you link a list, I'm sure mods can help you spam it, Rob. But there it is. So the first topic is going to be adepts. You guys can vote on that straw poll, and for the next minute or so, that will be made open. And then we will rate the change together and talk about it. So there's no real change here, though. This is a community feedback update, so let's read what Blizzard said, and then, as we did last week, we'll kind of rate our level of agreement amongst us, and then use yours as well, and so on and so forth. So with the stronger Terran and Zerg macro mechanics in the latest patch, we're not really seeing the same adept strength that we used to. Also, in exploring PvP more, it's not quite clear to us that mass adepts are the best composition in the later stages of the game. We will be continuing to test the adept armored flag change and potential changes to their upgrade internally, but we'd like to continue testing the current version a bit longer in the beta. We just don't want to be too quick to judge on the adept strength at this point, because it's not uncommon for players to overreact when core units that are added. Now he gives an example of what that would mean. It says one good example here is when the Marauder was first introduced in Wings of Liberty. For a very long time, even after the game launched, we were getting so much feedback, especially from Korean pro players, that Marauders were completely broken and needed to be nerfed. We never did nerf them, but they've been seen as balanced, as well balanced all throughout Hearthstone. So yeah, let's I guess rate the statement or the feedback from 1 to 10 amongst ourselves, and then we can discuss basically why we gave the rating that we gave it. And guys, panel, be open and willing to change your opinion if it warrants it, if the discussion warrants it, if you feel like, you know, someone brought something to the table that you weren't considering maybe. So Why don't we start with Dario?
Well, considering a lot of the feedback is about PvP, I'm not sure about that. But as from my Zerg perspective, I agree that adepts are not a big issue. At least for me personally, sometimes I lost games against Mass Adept, but then I usually did a lot of mistakes myself. And now that you have 4 lava again with the injects, it's really not a big deal, I think. What I don't like about them is that they're too strong against Zerglings, which kind of eliminates a cool unit from the early game, but I don't think they're too strong. So I don't know. I give it a 5 out of 10 because I don't know about the rest. So I'm going to go with middle ground.
Okay, cool. So maybe an opinion that can be formed with what other people say here. MorroW?
Oh, I would love to hear QXC first.
Okay.
7 out of 10. So I guess there's two. So let's start with the Marauder thing. I don't like this comment because it doesn't take into account that there were a number of changes based around the Marauder without changing the Marauder itself that ended up affecting balance. So, for example, initially Marauder had Concussive Shell to start with, and then it lost Concussive Shell. That became an upgrade. That's the only change that the Marauder has actually seen. But around things that the Marauder did, there was a big patch where Medivacs got nerfed. That's an indirect nerf to how the Marauder works. There was a patch where basically every Protoss and Zerg structure got additional hit points, and that was also a big nerf to how the Marauder works. Like, I'm looking at just old patches right now, and I haven't gone through too many, but the point is that just because the Marauder itself never changed, it may have prompted a whole number of other changes that indirectly affected its strength. And so I don't think this is a good example that they're using because it ignores like a pretty significant amount of changes to the game. As far as the Adept itself, it's so we've gotten to the point where good players are not dying to Adept all-ins, but it's still doing such a big effect on the matchup that I don't really like how it works. Like, there's basically no opportunities for Terran to attack Protoss early game. The Adepts are too strong against Marines, Marauders. They defend Widowmine drops. It feels like the Adept does everything for Protoss right now. And that doesn't seem like very interesting design. Like, you make one Adept and all of a sudden you can defeat Marine pressure, you can scout, you can kill SCVs. Like, it just does too many things at that point in the game, which is probably the biggest thing that I don't like about it, is I'd like to see the shade ability move to maybe like when you build a Twilight Council, it gets the shade, or it gets an upgraded version of the shade, or the initial stats are a little bit lower. It just feels like it does too much too early.
So yeah, we're going into a balanced discussion here, I guess. But yeah, what would you rate it, Kevin? And are you finished with your thought?
Yeah, I'm done. The statement is like 7 out of 10 because I think it's reasonable that they want to wait a little bit longer, but I also think it's reasonable that like they've seen plenty and it's okay to make the changes. There's just not a lot of games right now for them to.
Yeah, we're also on a pretty
big
tight
decisions.
timeline, and we have to consider that, right? There's only like 2 months or so till release.
Yeah.
So there's that to consider when thinking changes. If they want to test it for longer, they have to take into consideration there's not a lot longer to test for, at least until the game is officially released. Theo?
Well, I agree with most of what QXC said. I think in this patch, it's especially true that the Adept can kind of do everything for Protoss, because usually you might want to get a Robo for detection against Ghosts, because the Oracle has bad detection. And now you don't necessarily need to open Stargate because of the Liberate upgrade. And I think I would like to add that a lot of the Adept thing against Terran is especially concerned, with the association of a warp prison, right? But I'm not sure that's the right point to talk about that, but I just wanted to add it out. And then I basically agree with what QXC just said. So I would rate it 6, and it's not like they're concluding anything, they want to wait. I just want to say I give it a 6 or 7, because I do think the Adept does provide some needed protection for Protoss. I know there's concerns that you can't really attack a Protoss. They counter circlings, they counter Marines, Marauders. But I think it's quite needed in a sense that with the fast expanding and Protoss being a little bit weak, but it's true there's a problem that the Adept does everything. So yeah, but it's hard to know if it's fixable.
All right, MorroW.
All right. I would rate it pretty low, 4, because actually never mind the rating. I think the problem with this Adept is that it's like too strong early game, and it scales really bad into late game. So I would love to see them work that out somehow, because it's this early game, like CatZ said, it like kills pretty much everything. It's just a universal unit. Yeah, I don't know what to say else other than that. I would love to see it to be less hard country, because it has like 10 damage and then 23 to light. I think they should bring that closer. And then the shield upgrade, I don't like it being so tanky. I would like to have it more of a DPS role. So that's my take on the Adept. As far as the change itself goes,
is that because it overlaps with the Salad if it's too tanky, or?
Yeah, I think it's exactly. It's a little bit ridiculous. Like if you have it so tanky, it allows them to be able to like blink on top of a bio ball, just because they are so tanky. If they had more of a DPS role, then they perhaps couldn't do that, as effectively. So I think they're too similar to a Roach in that way. I would like to see them more similar to a Marine. But yeah. In this change, they're suggesting to make it armored. I don't necessarily think that's a super bad idea, because then we can get Marauders to counter them. But I think they're like going about it the wrong way. I would do different things to the Adept.
Okay, so a 4 is what we'll give you, even though you said never mind in the end there. I have a lot of thoughts on the Adept. We did discuss this a little bit last time. I'm not sure whether they're not seeing the same strength that they used to. Maybe because people aren't dying as much to Adepts itself, but that's not necessarily a good thing. I mean, just because the Adept is in the game, we have to play a certain way around it, and that is the case usually with core units. But I think that you have to do a little bit too much around it. Like TLO said, like Lynx are not very good against Adepts right now, so you basically have to open Roach Warren as a Zerg player. I don't necessarily like that having a unit like the Adept in the game cuts options. I'm not sure if TLO will agree with this, or if you found something that works for you, like plus or something like that.
To be honest, I think a general problem in Legacy of the Void is that all the early game units that require upgrades are nerfed heavily, but I think that can be figured out. If I think, for example, speed upgrade for Lynx, I think maybe needs to be a little bit faster. Because speed Lynx used to kick in super early in Heart of the Swarm and in Wings of Liberty. But the way the economy kicks off now, circling speed comes online much later in comparison to a lot of other more powerful options. I think that's one of the problems we're having. But yeah, I agree the Adept is it's like designed like a cool micro utility unit. But then the best move with the Adept is to just go right into the fight and be right at, you take your ghosts and you put them in front of the enemy army instead of like running around and doing cool stuff.
Yeah, I agree. It's. I think the unit is just too strong in the early game right now. I like that they're holding back on nerfing it for now. I don't necessarily mind that, but again, we're on a really tight deadline right now. If we look at Legacy of the Void for like as a process from the start, it seems like Protoss was the weakest race by far at the start, and then Adepts became really strong, and then that Protoss became really strong with them. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that unit's the fix all core unit that they're looking for here. It seems like a little bit rushed to me that they're not trying other things out, like maybe units that will transition better into a mid game. They have been tweaking around the Disruptor, and we'll go into that later, I think. But I will give the change or the lack of a change a 4. I think I would like for them to continue to test the Adept. I personally don't like the armor change because it seems like a shitty way to fix things, in my opinion. For example, it cuts down options for the Zerg. Right now, we can make banelings against the Adepts. You can, for example, put some banelings in an Overlord, and the Adepts are light, so we can take advantage of that. If you make them armor just to fix or to help the balance in PvT, then that removes more options for Zerg. That's already low on options. Now that doesn't necessarily mean Imba. It just means, to me at least, boring. I want to have as many options as possible, basically. And
Yeah.
right now it seems like we can only open Roach against Protoss. So does anyone?
It definitely feels more fun when like your opponent chooses a strategy and you get to choose a strategy kind of in response to that, and you've got like one or two things. And right now it feels like if your opponent makes Adepts, you have like one strategy that's okay for you, which is usually just like for Terran it's wall off and camp and look for War Prism all in, and for Zerg it's go Roaches or whatever. And
camp as well, right? Like we all have to just stay at home when that's Adepts. You can't just go out and do anything.
That is a problem right now, but it was a bigger problem maybe with the pylons. So then, you know, the pylon change might actually affect how that works, but maybe not that much. But yeah, it's a unit that kind of, I don't know, it feels like Blizzard has been trying to artificially make us play in the mid game by having things that are too powerful defensively in the early game. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Adepts to me are definitely a problem, and I think that they go together with things like the War Prism a little too well. So maybe they're linked there. Maybe would be enough. But yeah, I would like I share all my opinion with MorroW here that the Adept is too strong in the early game and falls off a little bit too quickly, perhaps, into the mid and late game. So if it could be a unit that scales better with upgrades. I'm not talking, you know, Forge upgrades, but maybe an upgrade that's unique to it that will let it scale better into the mid and late game. I think that's what I would like to see, and maybe a small nerf in the early game. And again, for the first time, I think we're going into balance. We normally stay on unit design or try to, and I think that Adepts are well designed. I think the Shade ability is awesome. I think the unit in itself is just fun. It's just great. It feels good. It feels like there's micro on both ends. You can chase the shades. You don't have to chase the shades and so on. But when an ability that's designed to be fun like that is just used to go in and surround your enemy because your units don't give a shit if they're ranged or melee because they're that tanky and that strong, then that's not good in my opinion. So, if anyone else has anything to add.
Yeah, just a quick thing. The reason MorroW is right about how you should change the gap and make more of a DPS-oriented unit, especially with the upgrade, is it now has a very slow attack speed, right? So if we say that it needs one more shot on either unshielded or shielded Marines, it means that the DPS lost if a Marine gets to a very low HP is quite huge. So that way we can kind of balance that situation with mass Adepts just blinking into a Marine Marauder mine army and just win, right? Even though the DPS change is completely equal to what the tradings would otherwise look like with the Adept being tanky. So that's why I think that direction is much better than going with the Marauder, because the fights will favor Terran so much more if the units gets to low HP and then the high DPS, the high damage burst doesn't scale as well with the units going low on HP, right? So attack speed upgrade would then make sense to balance that out in the late game, while the unit then being weaker in the early game, because units require an extra shot, right? That's what I think, at least, and why I agree with MorroW completely.
Attack speed or like a little bit of a bounce, just to have like bits of damage bleed out. But that's one of the main reasons that Protosses are going plus attack over plus armor right now, is because if you can get the Adept like just over that threshold, it's like Zealots with +1 against Zerglings. Makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Okay, definitely one of the more controversial topics. Twitch also gave it a pretty neutral rating, or the community did. So if anyone has any closing thoughts on this, now would be the time. Okay, I don't know if we agreed on anything in terms of you know, what Blizzard should do about it? Do you guys think that they should continue to test, or just kind of
Continue to test.
Like that means changes, right? Do we all agree that the adept needs some sort of a change?
Yeah, I'd like to see some tweaks.
Okay.
What I feel like that in late game they need to be good in low numbers, and right now they're not at all. But if you would make them just flat stronger, they'd be way too strong in early game. So that's a bit of an issue.
Yeah,
but
so it has to
they
be
can figure something out.
The upgrade that comes from the Twilight Council would have to be the way to go.
Yeah, but that still comes online pretty early, so I don't know what they can really do about it.
Maybe you need a Templar Archives for an upgrade then?
Well, I think the whole idea to make it less tanky and more of a damage dealer might be a good way to do it, because if they're low numbers in early game and they don't have a lot of hit points and you can just get there and kill them, maybe it's not, but I don't know. I think it's a big remains to be seen, to be honest.
Yeah, one of the more difficult topics to tackle here. So
yeah, the biggest thing, going off what TLO was just saying, is like for a while the Zealot and the Adept have kind of done the same thing. They're like both tanky units, and it seems like they want to make the Zealot the DPS unit and the Adept the tanky unit. So I think
doesn't make a lot of sense, does it?
Well, yeah, sense or not, one of the real potential ways that they could change the Adept to give it a more unique role is look at the Zealot, look at the Adept, and really decide like which one is the DPS unit, which is the tank unit, and go more extreme in that direction. So I could imagine the Adept actually having more hit points than it has now, but substantially less DPS. And then maybe even the Zealot gets a slight HP reduction and a slight damage increase, so that these two units really fulfill different roles, as opposed to both of them being like pretty tanky and pretty good at dealing damage.
I think the problem with that is, though, because the adaptability is kind of designed, you want to get into places and deal damage quickly or do something. But if you have a really tanky unit that can do that, the longer the game becomes, the more useless they become. Because if you have a really tanky unit and harass, but the enemy has a lot of damage dealers by then, the unit will just be there for 10 seconds, not really do anything, and then just die immediately. So having a lot of hit points is great in early game, I feel. But if you for a unit like that in late game, it won't really do much anymore. And then again, still just be part of the unit composition, kind of like a force, you know?
Yeah, it could be. So going off of that idea, it could be something like the Adept early game looks about how it does now, but its damage output is decreased, and so the Twilight Council or Templar Archives upgrade would be like a damage upgrade that allows it to scale into the later part of the game.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I think I could get behind that. So, yeah, let's move on from this topic. It's a controversial one, and I'm sure it's one that we will see next week and whatnot, because you know it's one of the more talked about things when it comes to Legacy of the Void. So let's go on to the other community feedback update, Rob, which was maps. Let me pull that up real quick. Cool. So maps in Legacy of the Void. This is a lot to read. Who wants MorroW? You do the reading. Your voice.
No, it's okay to read it.
Please.
You want to? I can just summarize it.
Yeah, Kevin. Summarize.
We don't have to read the whole thing. So basically, Blizzard is taking a stance on maps that more diversity is better. They want to keep the maps that are away from the standard in the pool for as long as possible because they promote more interesting gameplay. And they really don't like the times where every single best of 3 is played on Sejong, Overgrowth, and whatever, one other like relatively standard map, and each game is played out almost the same way. So maps like Runes of Ceres and Laralac, which are totally different, and even a lot of the maps in the recent HOTS map pool, they want to keep in for as long as possible to maintain diversity in gameplay.
Cool. My thoughts on that, I'll give it a 10. I personally think that's a great idea, and we don't have the same issues that we had in Heart of the Swarm for the most part, where, for example, Protoss or maps have to be designed around Protoss because you need the force fields to be effective. right now, it seems like there are options that Protoss can take, especially with a pylon overcharge, even if it is nerfed, and we'll go into that later. And the Adepts, where you don't necessarily need force fields to take another base. And this is something that people have complained about for the longest time in terms of Protoss design and whatnot, and I think it's being somewhat addressed. And with that, I think that maps, that opens up a gate for maps to just be a little bit more unique and a little bit more out there and create different gameplay. So for me, that's a 10. I think that's the direction that they should take, and I think that we have the tools now compared to previous expansions. So go for it. MorroW?
Yeah, I think sure, maps should be diverse, but we have to recognize that if a map is just slightly too strong in with one strategy, then the players no longer play as themselves. They just play to the map. So take Yongsu or Heavy Rain, take those Blink all-in maps from 2014, and that was during an era where Blink was also incredibly strong before the Blink nerf. So we saw Blink all-in every single game, and it wasn't it just all of a sudden became extremely uninteresting. So I think to make diverse maps, you don't have to make them extremely diverse to be really different. That said, I still yes, I agree. There should be different kind of maps, and for the vast majority of StarCraft 2, maps have been absolute shit. And I just want to say, the current map pool in Legacy of the Void, even though it's diverse, the map pool is complete trash in my opinion, and some things just don't work out. For example, Dash and Terminal, you can build pylons behind the natural, and Adepts have map control, and then you have a photon overcharge that kills the mineral line. As a player myself, I wish I had more than 3 map vetoes, because so many of these maps I simply just find completely unplayable in the current build of
you're talking about, for example, could you use an example that actually is a little more dated? Because with the new patch, the photon overcharge lasts twice as long. That's going to make a difference in that particular strategy that you mentioned, right?
Half as long.
Yeah, it's nerfed, but it's still incredibly strong, I think. And then you have, for example, Lyric Crust, which I haven't even played, because that map just has insane, you just attack from any angle into the natural. There's too many, it's too big of a choke, and it doesn't work. Well, we have played StarCraft 2 for 5 years. We know that you can't just have an infinite amount of space in your natural, because then you don't have SimCity to, as a defender, and especially against the depths where you basically need a wall or you die. And it ends up being that way. So I really don't like the current map pool. I encourage diverse maps in general, but to me, this is too extreme. And also the maps are made by Blizzard is complete crap. I don't know what my reading is, because I don't know what he's getting at in this text. If he's trying to justify keeping the map pool we have, then I give it a 1, because I want the map pool to be changed.
I think he's talking about just continuing to test maps and keep them diverse.
Map diversity. I can give that an 8. Sure.
Okay. Since
let me go.
Yeah, because you're a Terran. I was gonna let you go anyway, Kevin.
Okay, great. So, in regards to the Adept pylon stuff, I think that's more of a balance issue than a map issue. If your opponent has huge map control early game, dumb things are going to happen, and when the Adept is a little more reasonable, stuff like that will go away. But so for me, I like the idea of map diversity. The part that's missing about this section in the community feedback is that there's no acknowledgement that some maps are actually just bad. And this is kind of going with what MorroW is saying. We've played with enough maps in StarCraft 2 that we know that if the choke is completely wide open, it completely messes with the balance. There's too many things that don't work if you don't have a smaller choke in your natural. So for me, if they're going to keep testing maps and go with more diversity, they need to actually go with new ideas. And that will kind of, like, they can stay ahead of the meta and the balance curve by always bringing out new maps that break the game in new ways. And in the most recent HOTS ladder pool, all the maps are really interesting. And they were unique in new ways. Like the Dash and Terminal Natural is really weird, but it didn't feel broken because it was weird in a way that I hadn't seen before. And like the Bridgehead back entrance, so you get a CC, or you get like an expansion in your main, but you also have it be more exposed because of the back rocks. And like that's interesting. That hasn't been done before. Whether or not that's broken, I don't know. It's going to take people a while to figure that out. But with maps like Laralac and Runes of Ceres, like I know if my natural is completely wide open, like I'm just screwed. It's too hard to do so many different strategies. Like there's so many opportunities for abuse. So
is the main issue here Adepts though, or is this an issue against Zerg as well? Because
it has a little bit.
Like...
It's mostly Adepts, but it's a lot of like just gateway timings, like stuff that you need bunkers to defend. Is really, really hard. You need like 2 or 3 times as many bunkers because there are so many different angles they can come from, and there's so much space. Like, imagine defending on Zelnaga Caverns.
Right.
Right. Like, I've been there 2011. Like, I already know that it makes certain things like way, way harder than they should be. And so it feels super broken because I already know like what's really good on those maps. So I give this one a 7 out of 10 because I like the direction, I like map diversity, but I don't like the lack of acknowledgement that like some features in maps we don't want anymore. They're not appropriate, and if they're gonna do more diverse maps, they need to be diverse in new ways.
Okay, I think this discussion so far goes kind of hand in hand with what I started saying before, where you know, with the lack of force fields, maybe they felt like it was the right thing to, or that they could finally experiment with making naturals more wide open and whatnot. Because I for one hadn't taken into account TVP. Like I know nothing about TVP, so and it seems that that's where the biggest problem is right now in terms of experimenting with at least making the natural base a little too wide open, right? It's Protoss that you're worried about, you're scared of.
Yeah, I mean, there's also issues against Zerg, like once speedlings are out on the map, if you can't wall in your natural, it's really hard to actually be active on the map. And because there are 2 entrances to your natural and the choke into your natural is like, so if Laralac had very small ramps, but it had 2 of them, it would be a lot more reasonable. But it's got 2 entrances and both of the entrances are pretty big. So like being able to actually secure your natural before you leave your base is really, really hard against Zerg, and it makes
so we need a middle ground of maybe a sort of thing where maybe the natural in itself is a little bit more wide open, but the ramp leading to it is a little bit tighter. Maybe have like Catalina or Merry-Go-Round, which are already wide open ramps to be the testing field in terms of how big the ramp can be, maybe to start things off.
Yeah, so if you imagine Laralac, natural space and 2 entrances, but then ramps the size of Catalina.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's already double Catalina, but
yeah.
Okay.
And that's like an interesting trade-off. I've never seen a map like that before, so I can't immediately say like yes or no. This is going to lead to interesting gameplay or just like more of the same.
Right. Tielo. Dario?
He's muted.
I'm muted, sorry. Yeah, I'm pretty much agreeing with CatZ and MorroW. Especially MorroW, I'm also very much the same opinion that if you make a map too unique, it'll just lead to very, similar playstyle again and again. It might be different from other maps, but if you don't have a choice as a player anymore because something is just the best, it's not very fun. So if they want to be diverse, I wish Blizzard would be a little bit more active with like updating maps and like making slow steps towards, pushing a map towards a certain playstyle.
Maybe modifying. Would you consider modifying map pools within a season, for example? I don't think that's ever been done.
Yeah, I think that would be fine. And in general, maybe revisiting maps. because I think it's ridiculous that we have had a lot of really good maps that then just disappear forever into oblivion, and then okay, we get PTSD from Dreampool because we get the shittiest maps of all time, and they come back, but we never got the really cool, kind of standard but very solid maps back. And then if you can get like a 2.0 version of a cool map to like iron out some of the problems the map had, or to put a new twist on it, I think that would be a much better way to go at it. You know, if you have a good map, why just throw it away forever, in my opinion. So I also agree with the general sentiment. Map diversity is cool, but the way Blizzard is approaching it in the past and also in the current legacy map pool, I don't like either. So I agree with MorroW. If it's talking about the current map pool, it's a 1, and if not, the general sentiment, yeah, I'm totally for it. So I'm gonna give it an 8 under the assumption that they are not talking about the current map pool, but in general, I guess. But it's an 8, but really.
Okay, great. Theo?
I think there's so many things to talk about on this topic alone that you could write like a 500-page book on it. But I'm just gonna go with that. I feel that this notion that map design is about early game strategy. I think what is being overseen is how you can make map design unique and fun to the extent that it feels like a completely different map from others in the mid and late game. I would take the example with Vani Research Station and goal bases in general. With a completely new design of Legacy of the Void, I think it's possible to get this different view on goal bases, not as being such a, Zerg takes it, it becomes very all-in-y, or like you force the Protoss to attack, but it seems like with the different economy and especially harass tools from different units, especially the Adepti, that a lot of compensation can be done here with opening up new ways to create maps, utilizing the gold base, right? And I take Vani Research Station as the example with the middle gold base. I think it's cool to have maps that promote some kind of area of interest or multiple areas of interest, be it watchtowers in extremely good positions, or gold bases that is like a singular base that means that one player will always have more income than the other, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a gold base. It could be a triple geyser base or anything of this sense that would have little impact because it's supposed to be taken in the very late game. So it's something you have a lot of resources to fight for, right? So I agree that I think some of the maps in the current Legacy of the Void map pool, they have problems, as you've already explained. But I also think that the general direction, is very focused around, focusing on this, MorroW mentioned it, Bling Golems, for example. It could also be focused Dash and Terminal. I'm pretty sure that the War Prism Adept thing versus Terran has a, from the in-base, a 10-second faster rally and stuff. I think it would be cool to have, standard maps, which they seem to not really like, but with potential for huge variation in the mid and late game as well. That's kind of what I would like to see out of many other things, but I'll just stick with that. That's the main thing. So I'll rate it 7.5.
CatZ, you're muted.
Okay, 7.5 for Theo, I guess. We've never given a half rating before, so Rob, you can choose if it's a 7 or an 8, I guess. But yeah, I think the sentiment is pretty clear. You guys don't like the map pool. I personally don't have a big opinion on it, but it seems, especially from a Terran perspective or a TVP perspective, there might be a lot of issues with the current map pool. What you brought up about the War Prism, Theo, in Dash and Terminal, is Dash and Terminal really that horrible of a map, guys? I don't like it personally. I'm not trying to defend it here, but I just don't understand. I guess there's a little too much, maybe. What I do like about a map like Dash and Terminal, for example, is that Overlords can actually scout your opponent on that map still. TLO brought this up during the last topic, how it's there are things that change just with the economy being faster. For example, you can no longer use Overlords to scout in any matchup really, because by the time they get there, people already have units out because of how the economy works now. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure. There's a lot of things like that translate into maps that could make it for more interesting for more interesting design, I think. But at the same time, I agree with Theo too. I think that's a really good point to bring up. If they can make maps more fun in the middle and late game, I think that's probably the way to go about it, and that's where the focus of the game seems to be anyway. Blizzard doesn't seem to want a game that's in the early game, but mostly played in the mid game. So, maybe they should just be consistent with that philosophy and take what we know works of maps, experiment here and there, as they did with this map pool, and then if it doesn't work, just go back to what works and maybe look for different areas within maps to make them unique and have interesting play around them. So yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. If anyone has anything else to add on maps.
Well, just quickly, I think there's units there and balance is involved as well. For example, the Ravager. Now I haven't had issues per se, but it has forced me to open Gateway in the main basically every single time, because if you open Forge, you have the it's problematic versus Ravagers because you will have less unit production, and cannons, they don't really do anything against the outer range corrosive bile, right? And I'm sure that MorroW, he experiences similar things in TBC as well, and there's probably tons of other examples like that. But I think as long as we keep a unit in the early game that has these very long range things, and of course it depends on whether we like these warning strategies or not, that's going to affect the map design a lot as well. And I'm not going to say it's a problem right now, for at least in PvC, but I think it would be cool to have more than one option. I personally think 2 or 3 is the magic number. 2 like different routes you can go in terms of strategy. And it could be like Gateway, Forge, Stargate, but kind of right now it feels like you have to get 3 or 4 gateways straight off the bat just to not get overrun by like a fake third Roach Ravager Rush or 2 base Link Queen, Ravager Rush, or anything of those sorts that we have seen in a variety of ways. You really need the 4 gateways to defend it, in my opinion. So unless you want to put the Stargate in the main and stuff like that, but then you still kind of lose the the ability to wall off, right? So that's just another point I wanted to make in terms of how.
Yeah, fair enough. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that you don't have to wall off. The bad thing for you is the lack of options. Similar to what we brought up with the Adept change for Zerg, you basically have to account for the unit and play around it, go for roaches, and then you can't really open links without taking a risk, and so on. And it's the same for Protoss in the sense that cannons become pretty much obsolete, right? And with that, you remove options in the early game. For example, people that liked going for an early Forge, anticipating a fast expansion to try and punish it. That becomes a lot riskier because the Forge doesn't necessarily help you back at home if they don't go for a fast expand, or if you're not able to kill them with the cannons. So
Haas is still playing Forge. I played him 3 times a day. Today he's still doing it every time.
Haas doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, he still finds a way, but.
He's still fine.
Well, my point was just that it seems easy to me to get this interesting aspect of a variety of builds on even the same map by allowing this to happen rather than have the same strategy being forced in the early game. Because it seems like the problem with map diversity is that it gets boring just to use the same opening on every map. But if you have viability in 2 or 3 openings from the early game on most map, if not all, that seems to me to be the way that you can make the game more interesting, because then there's going to be the excitement of openings beyond, or just around, when you make your first pylon placement or depot placement or whatsoever, right? That's kind of my point with it, and the reason I said it rather than a balance issue. It seems to me that direction is the best way to get a consistent variety for all types of play, all in, mid game, late game, and still preserve the ability to make diversity in maps and force even more variety based on around that. So that's my point. And yeah.
I think I really, really think that's a really important and really good point to bring up. I think that the game needs to be fun and diverse, and I think that's one of the most important things, and one of the things that will make the game not just fun, but a game that people want to play over and over and over and over again. But if it's always the same start for every race, then gonna become obsolete really quickly. So I think we've correctly identified a problem that we can probably all agree with. But do we have a solution or a route that Blizzard should pursue to address this? Does anyone have any ideas?
Yeah, you need people to actually play the maps and have feedback. Oh, if you took 4 or 5 pro gamers and you played on Laralag, you'd be like, this is a dumb map. Runes of Sarah's like, this is a dumb map. We've seen these problems before.
Yeah, but like we're kind of going away a little bit from that topic and really quickly going into Theo's discussion here. It's not necessarily the maps. Always, like, there are units that just force you onto certain things, like the Ravager or the Adept. Right now, and that makes it so that games are somewhat monotone in the early game. If that makes any sense, do you see that as a problem? Do you think that, you know?
I think that's a balance issue more than a design issue, though. Like, if one unit is dictating the entire pace of a matchup's early game, like, then there's something wrong with that unit.
It needs to be tweaked. Maybe add some power to another. In the case of Adepts, maybe add some power to a different early game unit, or even all of the gateway units. Make them all have different utilities in the early game. Perhaps that's too much because that's a lot of things to account for. But likewise, maybe Zerg could have different options early on, and Terran too. I'm not really sure. Does anyone have anything else to add on this?
Yeah, I think it's very simple to buff the. I think it's very simple to buff the Zealot if nerfs are coming to Adept, that is, because proxy gateways non-existent with Zealots, of course, right? Because they're too slow with the economy.
Right.
That's one thing, very simple. DPS or health, just small amounts, 10, 20 HP or 1 more damage, anything, right? And for Zerg, with the Ravager in mind, because of Terran and Protoss openings, like, you could take the Corrosive Bile and reduce the damage to buildings, right? Or remove it completely and see if that's too much. But in my opinion, I think the Ravager already has a lot of trading potential with a very long range, especially the 30 range that I hear has a lot of potential of utility in TVC, right?
Oh, certainly. And in CBZ.
Yeah.
Well,
like,
the point is
it can be...
Like, the point is we need to tweak numbers, but I feel like we're kind of getting off topic and not really getting anywhere with that, to be honest.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Oh shit. Okay. Well, those were 2 of the largest topics, I guess, in the community feedback update. So we'll move on to the actual patch, since we were already dragging there, and then we'll probably go over a couple topics, take a quick break, and then come back. But yeah, so I guess basically on maps, we basically agree that some tweaking needs to be done to some units, and maybe that'll create more options early on for each race, and maybe that'll go hand in hand with maps and the design that's allowed and expected of them. So let's move on, Bob. What's
probably in about 2 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, so we got 10 minutes before a break. We're gonna go into Chrono Boost changes for Protoss, and the Chrono Boost increased from 1 to 4 seconds, and the Chrono Boost rate increased from 20% to 22.5%. Theo, why didn't you go?
10. 10. No more problems with Chrono Boost, at least much less. Perfect. Slight increase in efficiency, balances to mule changes. Perfect. 10.
Okay. Kevin?
Yeah, I really like this Chrono Boost. I like the old one too. Some people were having issues because the cooldown was too short, so you'd like chrono 3 things, but then the same Nexus would do all the chronos and it would be all messed up. By adding the cooldown, you make sure when you're casting Chrono Boost, you're not going to reuse a Nexus that you just used. It's still a little bit funny right now because let's say you have one thing Chrono Boosted that you want to keep Chrono Boosted, and then you want to cast a whole bunch of Chrono Boost somewhere else. Like, you're probably going to have to go back and redo the first thing. So, barring that one issue, I think it's perfect. I really like this new Chrono Boost. It allows you to shift. It allows you to use less actions to make the same decision that you were making before. Like, whether you put the Chrono Boost on the Warp Gate 4 times to get it as fast as possible, or just like put your one Chrono Boost on it and leave it, works out pretty well. So I like this change a lot.
MorroW? Was that a 10, Kevin?
It's an 8 because of
You said nothing negative about it. Why is
I did.
Why is it not a 10?
If you let's say you have 4 Nexuses and you have your Stargate Chrono Boost in the core, and you want to Chrono Boost 2 Forges and your Gateway. Probably when you Chrono Boost the 2 Gateways in the Forge, you're going to lose the Chrono Boost on the Stargate, and you're going to have to go back and redo it. That's the only problem that I have with the current implementation.
Okay. Is there any fix to that you see needs doing then?
Nothing simple comes to mind, so no.
Okay. MorroW?
Alright. I'm just gonna go ahead and say that I'm super happy that they didn't go back to Harder to Swarm Chrono Boost, because I really like how it works in Legacy of the Void with the Chrono Boost. So I'm gonna give this a 9, because I do recognize what CatZ says. I've also experienced this, that it's a little bit, with that issue, that you can mix it up with the Chrono Boost and all that.
All right, Dario?
So I must admit, I'm not entirely sure how Legacy Chrono Boost works, but it's still the same as like you put it on a building and it just stays on a building, right?
Yeah, so it lasts forever and doesn't cost anything.
Okay, so it's just that it takes more time to switch targets more frequently, like what you described. Yeah, that seems good. What I like about the change most is from 20% to 22.5%, for the reason that I would like to see Blizzard take tiny steps more often. So that's why I'm gonna give it a 10 out of 10. Because so often we see, like the Tempest was a perfect example. It goes from like does 30 damage to massive air units, and then suddenly plus 60 against massive air units, and there was a 200% increase in damage. And
Spores and Harder to Swarm.
Yeah, same. So I like the incremental, like the tiny increase or decrease in something. So I'm gonna encourage that and give that a 10.
Yeah, just to touch on that, people watching, that doesn't mean that we don't want Blizzard to be radical or to make big changes. It just means that once a big change has been made, maybe look for the right numbers to make them fit the game well.
Yeah.
Rather than just, oh shit, that didn't work, fuck it. If it's a good idea and the design is going a good direction, then that's probably where you just need tweaking instead of gigantic changes. So be not afraid of tweaking. I too do not understand Protoss Chrono Boost, but I will trust you guys and I will give it a 10. And Twitch gave it what, Rob? A 0, really? It's like a 5. Twitch gave it like a 5, so I think Twitch is gonna be a 5 because it's an average, and it's just like people rated 1 or 10. It seems a lot. So experiments failing on that regard. We'll see. We'll see if there's more topics that we can all agree on. But for now, we're gonna throw it to a break really quick. We'll be back in I don't know, 3 minutes or 5 minutes or something like that. So stick around, tweet about it. Let us know if you like the patch. If you have any questions at the end of the show, we'll answer those questions. So tweet with #patch. And yeah, we'll be right back.